All right, it is noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Dynow's July Lunch and Learn. Excited to have you join us today for our session. Today we're going to be talking about using Dyknow for positive reinforcement in the classroom for students as we go back to school. I think, as we go back to the in-person classroom, a lot of conversations have been happening around how to build those relationships, create strong communities in the classroom, and really build that positive reinforcement for students, both with using technology as well as with social emotional learning and just their academic performance in the classroom as we go back to the traditional hybrid or remote version, however you are planning to go back to school in the fall. So excited to have you joining us today. My name is Tierra Leustig. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Dyknow, and I'm joined by Casey Higgs for our presentation today. Before we jump into the topics and some introductions, I just want to give some expectations for what you can all expect from today's presentation and our session. As always, the Q&A is open, so we encourage you to submit any questions that you have about Dyknow, about what we'll be talking about and presenting on, and really any questions for Casey and I throughout the presentation. So go ahead and submit those questions as they come to you using the Q&A tool. We'll be keeping an eye on those questions and giving some time at the end to answer them. So go ahead and submit those. If you have comments as well, feel free to drop them in there. We have the chat disabled, so if you have anything to communicate to us, feel free to use the Q&A tool. We'll have our eyes on that throughout the whole session. And then in addition, this session is being recorded as with all of our lunch and learns. So if you are not able to attend the whole session or registered and we're not able to attend live, we will be sending you the recording following the event today. So you'll receive that recording. If you're interested in receiving PD credit from your school or district for attending today's session, I'm happy to provide you with a certificate of attendance to submit to your professional development department. We're happy to do that because we know it's a good thing to have some professional development credit during the summer months and kind of get ahead on that. So happy to give that to you and just reply to that email and let me know if you would like a certificate. I think that's everything in terms of expectations that I have before today's session. So we'll jump into it. I know we have majority of people joining us are current Dyknow users. If anyone is not a current Dyknow user and you're not familiar with Dyknow, Dyknow is a monitoring solution for school issued devices. So we monitor one-to-one devices in the classroom and really enable teachers to gain visibility into student screens, whether they are teaching remotely in the classroom or in a hybrid model, as well as create blocking plans, monitor devices, and gather all of that student activity history after class to really inform decisions. So that's what our classroom management tool does. And then at the beginning of this year, we also added a secondary module for administrators and tech coaches called Device Impact Measurement. That really enables tech coaches and admins to get that same activity data for devices and technology, but at the school and district level. So really understanding at a high level, how are devices being used? How is technology being used? Are the investments that you've made in ed tech tools being worthwhile? Are you wasting budget on specific tools or in certain areas, and kind of informing professional development from there on those tools as well? So really comprehensive monitoring and management of school issued devices and activity. So that's an intro to Dyknow. As I said, I'm sure a lot of you are customers, so we are grateful for you being great users and are excited to talk with you all today about using Dyknow for positive reinforcement. As I mentioned, I'm Tierra Leustig, Dyknow Director, and Casey Higgs is going to be kind of leading our presentation today. So I'll throw it off to Casey. And like I said, we'll be monitoring that Q&A. So if you have any questions, any comments, drop it in there. I'll be monitoring that while Casey's presenting, and I'll pass it off to Casey.
Thank you, Tierra. I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay. But thank you, as always, for joining us for this Lunch and Learn. I've loved doing these so far. As Tierra mentioned, I'm Casey. I'm the School Success Director, and I've been with Dyknow about 4 years now. Our team is all about our customers, from onboarding, training, and supporting schools that use the Dyknow product. In my role specifically, I'm always working with our customers on implementing, new customers too, on implementing Dyknow in their school or district. And oftentimes those conversations, heavily revolve around how to use Dyknow strategically in the classroom. For example, are we wanting more of a policing tool, or are we wanting to really encourage digital citizenship and the safe use of technology in the classroom, or is it something else altogether? Well, I think you'll find that Dino can be incredibly valuable regardless of your school's tech team. And excuse me one moment, I want to make sure you cannot hear that in the background. Got a lot on in my background today. I am out of town with baby. I know no one cares about that, but I'm just closing out another tab so I don't interrupt us any further. Thank you. Thank you. So anyway, regardless of your school's tech strategy, no matter your teacher's approach to classroom instruction, I think you'll find that Dino can be incredibly valuable. And as we'll discuss really throughout this whole presentation, I think it's oftentimes really easy to think of tools like Dino as policing, but we are so much more than that. And we don't necessarily need to be used for disciplinary purposes. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is that Dino can and actually should be used for positive reinforcement. So we really, we chose this topic, positive reinforcement, today because of a new enhancement that Dyknow released. It was actually last week, I think, and it was an enhancement to the send a message feature, which currently enables teachers to really quickly and easily send some pre-filled messages to students. So there's like a default list in that send a message module that teachers can select from to send quick messages to their students, to one student, to multiple students, to the whole class, et cetera. And we've added 2 new very positive messages to that list. Overall, sending a message to students during class has always been important. It's important because it's teachers' way of communicating with their class, right? And it became absolutely critical during the pandemic when the entire physical classroom was just disrupted, right? There were remote classrooms, there were hybrid classrooms, and things just honestly were really challenging, right? Things could feel really negative. We didn't know what was coming next for students, for teachers, for schools entirely. It was definitely a crazy transition. But here at Dino, we're always focusing on the positive, and we're all about helping teachers create a more focused classroom environment. That's a positive thing. I just mentioned that it's easy to think of tools like Dino as being meant for policing or disciplinary purposes, but we really are so much more than just a monitoring tool like that. And Dino can be used for so much more than that, specifically for positive reinforcement. So we've been thinking, right? How do we help more teachers build positive learning environments? How do we help schools build more positive learning environments? How can we help social emotional learning for students? And after doing some research, specifically, we looked at our send a message feature. We looked at what messages were being sent most frequently by teachers to their students, right? What were the FAQs that they were sending? And we were actually really thrilled to discover that a lot of Dino teachers were already using the send a message feature for positive reinforcement. And so this next slide is going to show a little bit more of what we found, the type of messages that teachers were sending most often with Dino send a message feature. And these are all custom messages, right? So there are 3 main categories. The first, the most popular type of message that teachers are sending to students is about simple redirection. For example, a teacher pushing out a website URL with instructions on what to do on that website for students. Especially during the pandemic, there was a lot of reference on remote learning specific messages like, hey, can you join the Zoom call? Are you going to join the Zoom call? Where are you at on the Zoom call? And that's not surprising, right? It makes sense that teachers are frequently communicating with students to direct them to specific activities, be that a Zoom call, some Google Doc, maybe, whatever. The second most popular type of message that teachers have been sending are logistical type of messages. So, teachers using the send a message feature to communicate with students, with the whole class really, what the plan is for that day or specific, lesson. So really setting expectations for students and using Dyknow to help them understand what they need to do when they come to class, or maybe when they're moving to a different, instruction, etc. The third most popular category was positive reinforcement, right? Messages of encouragement and affirmation. It was just such a cool discovery. Of course, teachers are just awesome people in general, but it was just really nice to see that in such a negative time, teachers themselves were just naturally using Dyknow without any instruction from us or anyone else to use Dyknow to really reach out and communicate with their students and open those lines of communication. Um, the current messages that we have in the send a message feature, well, excuse me, the previous ones, not including the two we just added, were a little negative. They are meant to call out negative behavior or to help redirect students. So, this third category is really just a testament to how seriously teachers take social emotional learning concerns, especially during a pandemic. Excuse me. So now let's talk about the how-to. How do you go about sending messages to students in Dyknow? What are some examples even that you can use Dyknow for to do, to send messages of positive reinforcement? So teachers can access Dyknow send a message feature in one of two ways. This is during a live monitoring session. You've got either grid view or big view, as you can see here on the slide. When you're in grid view, that main monitoring view where you can see all of your student device thumbnails, you'll see that the send a message feature was accessed to the right side of the screen. Where that real-time activity tracker is, there's a bell icon that you'll click on, and then you'll click on the send a message button. When you're in big view, you'll find the send a message button in the left-hand corner, actually, that upper left. But overall, the functionality is the same, whether you're accessing the send a message feature from big view or from grid view. And when you're within the send a message module, you have the option to select, what message you actually want to send to students, which students you want to send a message to, and then whether or not you also want to lock those student devices. So whether you want to send a locked message or an unlocked message. And when you're deciding what message you want to send to students, you'll use the text field. First, you'll decide, whether you want to write your own custom message or whether you just want to pick from that list of default messages that we're providing there for you. And this text field specifically is exactly where you'll find this new Dyknow enhancement. There are two new default messages in that list. So now you've got two options that are really, really positive. The first one just says, good job. And the second one is keep up the great work, both with exclamation points. So ideally, teachers that are already using the send a message feature to send messages of positive reinforcement to their students can do so even more quickly, even more easily. And hopefully even more teachers now will use this feature to send positive reinforcement messages to their students too. Once you select the text of the message that you want to send, you'll move on to the device lock field, right? Deciding whether you want to send a locked message or an unlocked message. We're just going to drill into that part specifically now. So the device lock field gives you two options, yes or no. And depending on which one you select, you'll find that there are actually different messages in the text field. So this is part of this new enhancement as well. And these slides, or excuse me, this slide, these two images show those two different situations. So the one on the left is the default situation in Dyknow where the device lock is just set to no. So that was actually an enhancement that happened, gosh, a year ago now, maybe, I don't even know. But it is, that's the default to send an unlocked message. And when the device lock is set to no, you'll be able to select one of 4 preset messages in that text field. And 2 of those 4 messages are the new positive reinforcement messages we've added. But of course, you still have the ability to send, to write and send your own custom message. On the right, you'll see where the device lock is yes. You don't actually have those new positive message options. Rather, you're only able to select from 3 default messages, unless of course you want to write your own custom message. So quick recap. Unlocked message gives you 4 default options, and 2 of those are the new positive ones that we just added. If you're sending a locked message, you've got 3 default options. Because it probably wouldn't make sense to send, a positive message to your student at the same time you're locking their device. That could send mixed signals. So, always remember what the student experiences when you're working in Dyknow, right? Remember what they might be feeling when they receive such a message from you. Again, you can always send your own custom message though. So now let's take a look at some specific examples. How can you use Dyknow for positive reinforcement in the classroom? Well, first I want to call out the fact that there's no limit ever to the number of messages that you can send to students during a given monitoring session. So you're free to send messages to one student, to more students, whatever, as often as you'd like. And I've outlined a couple of best practices here. So with positive reinforcement, there are a couple key things you always want to think about. So when you're sending a message to students in Dyknow, you want to think about these things as well. And that is to deliver messages of positive reinforcement immediately. And this is important because you want students to be aware of it so they can associate their appropriate behavior, right? The target behavior with the positive message. If you wait to the end of class to praise a student's behavior, the student might not even remember specifically what they did or what specifically they did. Maybe they did a bunch of good things. They're not going to remember which one it was to deserve that praise specifically. So you want to tie those 2 things together. And similarly, it's important to deliver messages of positive reinforcement consistently. The consistency is important so that students recognize, again, that connection between their appropriate behavior, their target behavior with your positive words, with your praise. And finally, the positive reinforcement messages really need to be clear and sincere. I like that it rhymes, right? You want to identify exactly what that target behavior was, what was appropriate for the student, so they know exactly why you're actually delivering that message, right? It makes sense to them. And it's sincere. No matter what their age, students are probably going to be able to tell if you're being genuine or not, especially for the older students. You don't want to insult them by any means. So specifically, let's take a look at some examples. First and foremost, you might, excuse me, let me take it back. Let me back up. So there are a couple different features within Dyknow's monitoring, right? We've been talking this whole time about the send a message feature. Well, what are you going to actually write in the send a message option if you want to write a custom message? So you've got the option to use that short pre-filled list. What happens if you select the custom message option? What would you include in that as a teacher? Here are some examples, I think, in the real world that will help you apply this whole concept of positive reinforcement via the send a message feature in Dyknow. The first one is in relationship to the student understanding feature. So you might, let's say, for example, use the student understanding feature during a monitoring session. So you make a request to students, just, are you following along? Are you understand what is happening during class? And let's say in this example that every student, but just 1 or maybe 2 select students responds and says, yeah, I get it. I know what's going on. I follow what you're saying. Keep going. But 1 student, right? And this 1 outlier student or 2 outlier students say, no, I don't get it yet. Well, since it's only just a select few, you don't necessarily want to stop for class, stop the class to address that, or you have the option to actually follow up with a student later, but still address their concern in real time in a very positive way. So in this situation, I'd recommend maybe sending a message to that 1 select student, a custom message, recognizing that their response is what it was, that they didn't understand, and giving praise, admitting them for, or praising them for admitting that they didn't necessarily understand something, but still offering to follow up with them at a later date and time to discuss that topic further, say if you don't have time to address it in class. So again, in this situation, you're not necessarily stopping class to call out just 1 student, which could even potentially embarrass them in front of the class if they're the only one who doesn't understand something. But the more important thing is that you're taking time to acknowledge their lack of understanding and ideally help them feel more comfortable about being honest in the future. So if they ever don't understand something again, they're likely to continue to be honest about it and upfront with you, the teacher. So remember, deliver the positive reinforcement message immediately and clearly. The second example I want to talk about is similar. So let's say that you're using Dynow's question feature and you're polling students during class. Some students are going to answer correctly, some students will answer incorrectly. And in this situation, I'd recommend sending two messages. The first one actually could be a custom message, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. In fact, you could use one of those new positive messages that we've included. Um, but it's a good job message, let's say, for example. So you would send that message to the first group of students, the students that answered the question that you asked correctly. And the second message would probably be a custom message that you would send to students. And this is the one that gets sent to everyone that actually answered incorrectly. So this custom message might say something like, nice try, or, so close. You selected X, but the correct answer is Y. And, maybe here's a simple explanation to help you better understand. And again, you're delivering this message immediately with clarity, with sincerity, etc. My final example here is all about our class history feature, actually, using the data in the class history feature to trigger positive reinforcement. So this example is maybe less about delivering positive feedback immediately and more about delivering it consistently. So let's say you're reviewing this class history data weekly, or maybe even on a monthly basis. I prefer weekly. Eventually you'll notice trends. Specifically, you'll notice that students, some students have been more on task than others. Well, you can actually take and use this data to help deliver positive reinforcement to your students. If a student has been consistently on task during a given week, let them know. You can save this class history report as a PDF. You can print it out. You can show it specifically to that student so he or she can see it for themselves. Or similarly, you might notice that a student wasn't very focused during the first few weeks of class, but now, weeks later, the number of distractions defeated within your blocking plans has actually decreased for that particular student. So you can actually see in the data that that student is improving with their digital citizenship, right? They're being more responsible with their technology. Improvement is the perfect opportunity for positive reinforcement. You're showing improvement, you're showing effort, that should be recognized. That's a perfect opportunity for positive reinforcement. Maybe you're even as a teacher setting goals for students to help them stay focused during class. This class history data can help you send messages of positive reinforcement to update students on their progress throughout this, towards achieving said goal. Big or small, whether you have goals or not, this positive reinforcement is really important for students. It's important for social and emotional learning. And even though Dyknow is a classroom management tool that helps teachers monitor student devices, it can also help teachers deliver positive reinforcement immediately, clearly, consistently, etc., to their students. And when teachers are doing that in Dyknow, the Dyknow support team is here to help if they need anything. Teachers, tech coaches, administrators, if you have questions about the product, if you have questions about the send a message feature and using it for positive whatever, please reach out to us. I always say that we love to hear from you. We love feedback. Your questions and your feedback help us get better as a team, and they help us help other customers as well. So it's always super important. Send positive messages, give us positive messages, positivity all around. That is all I have to share today. Tierra, I will send it back to you to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Casey. That was very interesting and informative. I love highlighting the other features within Dyknow, like the messaging, the question bank, and the polling. I think those are features that really got a lot of usage, especially during remote learning for student engagement. And I hope that users, really continue to use those, especially for positive reinforcement as we go back into the classroom. We do have one question in the Q&A. If anyone else has questions, feel free to submit them now. Sandra asked, she works for Teen Challenge, which is a program for troubled girls, and they have strict internet rules. She's wondering if they will be able to message her, the teacher, back, and only her, not anyone outside of the class, such as like a source of friends or something like that.
That is a great question. Dyknow does not currently have the ability to chat with students in that way. They can only select from your preset answer options if your example, or if you're asking a question, for example. If you're just sending a message, they cannot send any response at all to you. They're just receiving that message. But as I mentioned, we always love to hear feedback. So I'll take that as feedback, and I appreciate you sharing it and asking the question. We will make note of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions in the Q&A, and we're about up on time. So thank you again, Casey, for a great presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us today for this session. Next month at the end of August, we will be hosting a back to school lunch and learn. So that session will really cover, a checklist of things you should have checked off with Dyknow to make sure that you're ready to go back to school and that teachers are ready to use Dyknow in the classroom for remote learning if you'll be going back remotely. And then also at the beginning of September, we will be hosting a larger back to school summit, which is kind of more in line with our larger conferences that we host digitally. So we'll have a great panel of speakers from the industry who will share kind of different topics for going back to school and things we should be aware of if they've already gone back to school, how that's going for them so far. So we have some exciting events coming up. Keep an eye on your inbox and on social for all of those. We'll definitely be promoting them and sharing those registration links with you. Everyone who joined today will receive the recording after the fact, as well as a certificate of attendance if you need one. Again, just respond back to that email. I'll be happy to send you a certificate of attendance. I think that's all I have today. Casey, anything else you want to share with our attendees before we let them go?
No, that is all. Thanks again for a great session, and I look forward to next month.
All right, we'll see you all next month. Have a great weekend. Bye.